Warning, spoilers ahead for Dispatch and sexual content. Hello, my followers and lurkers. I'm Happy Fangirl too, because why be cynical and sad when you can be happy and glad? In today's video, I'm diving back into my hyperfixation, Dispatch, and I'm talking about a very important character, one that you either adore or despise. Invisigal. Created by Ad-Hoc Studio, Dispatch is a choice-based narrative game where your decisions shapes the story's narrative. You play as Robert Robinson III, aka Mecha Man Blue. He's been temporarily sidelined from superhero field work and is working as a dispatcher at the Superhero Dispatch Network while his suit is being repaired. As a dispatcher, he's responsible for coordinating villains turned superheroes in the field. The player's job is to decide which heroes are best suited for each mission, carefully balancing their strengths and character synergy to achieve success. Traditionally, many stories follow the structure outlined by Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey, a framework centered on external trials, conquest, and transformation through action. Think of the hero's journey as ascension up a mountain. The hero starts at the bottom of the pinnacle with only what's on him. He treks upward, and the hero collects allies, tools, and items along the way. He opposes the big bad, defeats them, and ascends the mountain, carrying with him the knowledge he's collected. This model has shaped countless narratives across genres. Dispatch offers something more nuanced. Beneath its humor and branching choices, the game presents character arcs that diverge from this familiar structure. In particular, Invisigal's storyline aligns more closely with the framework proposed by Maureen Murdoch in The Heroine's Journey. Rather than a journey defined by outward victory, hers is an inward descent, one that prioritizes self-confrontation, healing, and the reconciliation of identity. The heroine begins at the summit with all her outer and inner inventory, her tools, friends, and items. It's on her descent where she has to lose what has aided her so far. It's at the base where she dies and rises like a phoenix, transforming into an entirely new person. Where Campbell's model emphasizes becoming, Murdoch emphasizes remembering and integrating. It's by following the decision tree that leads to the good ending without romancing her, the audience witnesses this alternate arc unfold. Invisigal does not simply rise to heroism through triumph or mastery. Instead, she struggles against internalized beliefs about who she is allowed to be. Her journey is not about proving her strength to the world. It's about dismantling the idea that her past, her powers, or her perceived nature define her future. In this way, Dispatch stands out. It doesn't reject the hero's journey outright, but it expands beyond it, offering a narrative where growth comes not just from external success, but from the quieter, more arduous work of self-acceptance and change that is the heroine's journey. Stage 1. Separation of the feminine. In the opening sequence of episode 2 of Dispatch, Blonde Blazer introduces the heroine, Invisigal. The audience learns that her former villain name was Invisibitch, a label Blazer reframes into the more heroic Invisigal. However, she is yet to fully grow into this new identity. She remains underdeveloped, still grappling with her inner virtues, as shown by her spying on her boss, her blunt, crass language,
So, you two fuck or what?
and theft of Blonde Blazer's earrings. This signals that she has not yet fully internalized the virtues associated with her new role. Instead, she exists in a liminal space between villainy and heroism, showing that identity reconstruction is an ongoing and fraught process rather than an immediate conversion. The name Invisibitch itself reflects a tension between the female inner world and the pressures of the male gaze. In society, women are portrayed as caregivers, nurturers, and overall polite. The term bitch, by contrast, functions as a cultural reprimand, used to describe women who defy these expectations by being assertive, demanding, or autonomous. As Maureen Murdoch argues, a woman who is assertive, demanding, and purposeful is portrayed as a devouring bitch. By adopting the name Invisibitch, the character appears to both acknowledge and internalize the societal judgment. Furthermore, the name Invisibitch suggests a degree of self-awareness. It can be read as an attempt to reclaim a derogatory label,
Invisible bitch!
transforming it into a form of empowerment. However, this reclamation is deeply ambivalent. While it signals agency, it also reinforces the very framework that devalues women, as it accepts the premise that female assertiveness is inherently negative. Murdoch's observation that women start to define themselves in terms of deficits is particularly relevant here. Invisibich's identity is constructed not only around what she is, but around what she perceives herself to lack: acceptability, femininity, and moral legitimacy. In this sense, her name becomes both a shield and a confession, simultaneously resisting and reproducing patriarchal norms. However, this reclamation is complicated, as it comes at the expense of her own gender, reinforcing the very standards that diminish her. The transformation into invisigal marks an attempt to resolve this tension, orchestrated through the Phoenix program by Blonde Blazer, the Torrance branch manager of SDN. This renaming represents more than a superficial rebranding. It is framed as a symbolic rebirth. Blonde Blazer herself functions as an archetypal figure, the embodiment of female authority, confidence, and control. Within this framework, she can be understood as a manifestation of the goddess archetype described by Murdoch, a representation of female power that exists independently of patriarchal validation. The image of the goddess is an acknowledgement of female power, not dependent on men nor derived from the patriarchal vision of women. Blonde Blazer's role, then, is not merely managerial, but mythic. She offers Invisigal a model of what empowered womanhood might look like: integrated, self-defined, and whole. The renaming from Invisibitch to Invisigal reflects a shift in paradigm. The suffix gal softens the aggression of the former identity, aligning it more closely with approachability and social acceptability, while still retaining a sense of individuality. However, this transformation is not without its complications. If Invisibitch was an internalization of patriarchal condemnation, Invisigal risked becoming an internalization of idealized femininity. In other words, the character moves from one constructed identity to another, neither of which fully escapes external definition. Despite this, the renaming opens up the possibility of growth. Invisigal is not yet the fully realized heroine that Blonde Blazer envisions. She is still grappling with her impulses, language,
You're in the squirters. You like that gush in your throat? Cool. Okay. Say less.
and sense of self. Yet, this incompleteness is crucial. It highlights the difficulty of reconciling internal identity and external expectations, particularly for women navigating systems that simultaneously demand conformity and punish deviation. Through Blonde Blazer's intervention, Invisigal is offered not just a new name, but a new narrative, one that gestures toward wholeness, even if she has not yet achieved it. Ultimately, Invisigal's journey reflects a broader commentary on female identity formation. The transition from Invisibitch to Invisigal is not a simple redemption arc, but a complex negotiation between self-perception, societal judgment, and aspirational ideas. It underscores the idea that empowerment is not a fixed state, but an evolving process, one that requires confronting rather than merely renaming the forces that shape and constrain the self. Stage 2, identification with the masculine and gathering of allies. During the second stage of the heroine's journey, a woman wishes to identify with the masculine. Invisigal's transition from villainy to heroism unfolds under the guidance of Robert Robinson III, also known as Mecha Man Blue. When she is first introduced to him, the player is given agency in shaping their dynamic through dialogue choices, particularly in response to her skepticism about his credibility as a hero. Selecting the line,
Having superpowers doesn't automatically make you a superhero. You're born with one, you have to earn the other.
By choosing this dialogue option, Robert in this instance has become the pseudo-father in this playthrough. However, Invisigal's relationship with Robert is far from harmonious. Despite recognizing, at least intellectually, that he is there to guide her, she resists his authority. This tension is evident when she disregards his strategic advice during the robbery at Granny's, with her prioritizing impulse over discipline. Her resistance reflects an internal conflict. She is caught between her past identity as a villain and her desire to become something better, yet she lacks the emotional framework to fully accept guidance. When Robert reprimands her, Invisigal reacts defensively, even lashing out. His criticism does not register as constructive mentorship, but as personal rejection. This response reveals a deeper psychological wound. Her longing for acceptance within the superhero community is so intense that any perceived failure feels like confirmation that she does not belong. Rather than integrating his guidance, she externalizes her frustration, projecting her insecurity onto him.
Here's some advice. You're right at home behind that desk because you're no hero. You were a nerd playing a video game in a suit your daddy built. Now you're a twitchy little bitch turtle without a shell. A real hero puts their ass on the line. A real hero can't just press a button and make their problems disappear.
Murdoch's framework helps contextualize this struggle. Women who have felt accepted by their fathers have confidence that they will be accepted by the world. They also develop a positive relationship to their masculine nature. They have an inner masculine figure who likes them just as they are. This positive inner male, or animus figure, will support their creative efforts in an accepting, non-judgmental way. Invisigal has not yet internalized this supportive animus. Instead, her internal masculine voice manifests as critical and adversarial, mirroring her unresolved feelings about authority, validation, and belonging. This lack of integration is compounded by internalized misogyny, which distorts her perception of strength and worth, pushing her to reject vulnerability and guidance in favor of defensiveness and control. As a result, her development during this stage is marked by self-sabotage. While she is technically gathering allies through her connection with Robert, she has not yet learned to trust or collaborate. The masculine, represented externally by Mecha Man Blue, remains something she resists rather than integrates. Only by reconciling this tension, by allowing herself to accept mentorship without equating it to weakness, can she progress further in her transformation into a heroine. Stage 3. Road, Trials, and Meeting Ogres and Dragons. In Episode 3 of Dispatch, Invisigal's arc closely mirrors the psychological journey described by Maureen Murdoch, a descent into uncertainty, where the protagonist must confront internal contradictions rather than external enemies. As Murdoch explains, the heroine is alone at night, metaphorically, wandering the road of trials to discover her strengths and abilities and uncover and overcome weaknesses. Invisigal embodies this moment precisely in the park scene, which places her at her emotional and psychological lowest point. Her past as a villain represents the safety of the known, an identity shaped by environment, expectation, and survival. Becoming a hero, by contrast, forces her into unfamiliar terrain where those external explanations no longer hold. In the field, she can no longer blame her parents, her past, or the system she grew up in. The journey demands self-confrontation. What emerges is not confidence, but a crisis of identity. The park scene visually and symbolically reinforces this crisis. Robert finds her sitting alone on a swing set, smoking, a striking image that juxtaposes adulthood with childhood innocence. The playground, often a symbol of safety or emotional refuge, becomes a space of dissonance. Invisigal does not belong here, just as she believes she does not belong among heroes. Her physical state mirrors her psychological one, suspended, moving back and forth but going nowhere. Her language reveals the depth of her internalized fatalism.
I have fucking villain powers. I can turn invisible and skulk in the shadows. My powers let me steal shit and watch famous people fuck. Being a villain is my fate.
This is the inner dragon of doubt that Murdoch describes, the internalized voice that insists identity is fixed and destiny is predetermined. Invisigal equates her invisibility with moral deficiency. Because her powers are stealthy, secretive, and easily misused, she assumes they define her as inherently corrupt. In her mind, ability equals destiny. Sketchy powers equals sketchy person. This belief reframes her earlier behavior across episodes 2 and 3. What initially reads as laziness, incompetence, or apathy is revealed instead as self-sabotage. She does not try fully because she does not believe success is possible. Failure, then, becomes a form of confirmation rather than a risk. Robert functions here as a counterforce, not a savior, but a challenger. Where Invisigal sees fate, he asserts agency.
You make your own destiny.
This moment aligns with Murdoch's notion of integrating the masculine principle, not as agenda, but as action, clarity, and outward assertion. Robert represents this energy. He urges her to take the sword of truth, to act despite doubt, rather than wait for certainty. Importantly, he does not invalidate her pain. Instead, he reframes her conclusions. Their exchange transforms into something more intimate through humor. Their banter about movies, Kung Fu Panda, The Lion King, Trolls 2, softens the confrontation and establishes trust. This tonal shift is crucial. It humanizes both characters and allows vulnerability to emerge without sentimentality. It also hints at Invisigal's past coping mechanisms, escapism through film, enabled by her invisibility, adding another layer to her characterization. Robert's most important contribution, however, is not philosophical. It is practical. When the opportunity arises to stop lightning struck, he reframes the abstract question of destiny into a concrete choice. Act or don't. But Robert pushes again, reframing her inaction as a choice rather than inevitability.
It's not done. Get this guy and it could make a difference.
He stole a roll of pennies out of the cash register at Granny's. I don't think he's moving the needle.
This line is pivotal. It exposes her fatalism as a defense mechanism. If she never truly tries, she never has to confront the possibility that she might fail on her own terms, or succeed and have to redefine herself. The turning point comes not through a grand realization, but through a subtle shift. When she learns the scale of the robbery, her reaction?
Oh, he's about to steal $250,000 of jewelry.
Oh, shit.
Respect.
So go move the needle.
Briefly reconnects her to her old mindset. Yet instead of pulling her backward, this moment becomes a bridge. Her past identity as a thief becomes motivation rather than a limitation. For the first time, her villain instincts are redirected toward a heroic outcome. Her decision to act is small, almost casual. She stands up, returns a cigarette, uses her inhaler, and runs towards the scene. But symbolically, this is enormous. She chooses motion over stasis, action over avoidance. The swing stops, the journey resumes, and she defeats him. Stage 4. Experiencing the boon of success. When hauling in a defeated Thunderstruck, the rest of the Z team are there, cheering and congratulating her. Later, she sees herself move up the leaderboard. Her reaction is deeply personal. Third from the bottom is insignificant to others, but to her, it is proof that change is possible. It validates effort, not perfection. Yet, even in this moment of triumph, she retreats, turning invisible again when she notices others watching her. This detail is critical. Growth has begun, but it is not complete. Her invisibility remains both her power and her shield, used to avoid vulnerability, even as she moves toward connection. In the final exchange of the episode, her quiet
Thanks.
to Robert captures the essence of her arc at this stage. It is hesitant, indirect, and fleeting, but it is real. Ultimately, Episode 3 does not redeem Invisigal, it redefines her. The park scene reveals that her greatest obstacle is not her past, her powers, or even other people's judgment, but her own belief that she is incapable of change. By challenging that belief, Robert does not fix her. He creates the conditions for her to begin fixing herself. Finding the inner boon of success requires the sacrifice of false notions of the heroic. When a woman can find the courage to be limited and realize that she is enough exactly the way she is, then she discovers one of the true treasures of the heroine's journey. Now, Invisigal enters the uncanny valley of success, a space where accomplishment feels both validating and unsettling. Her emotions are entangled, pride in what she has achieved, yet unease about what the achievement means. She begins to question whether the triumph she has been taught to value is truly what it appears to be. Warning: sexual content ahead. Stage 5. The heroine awakens to feelings of spiritual death. In the opening of episode 4 of Dispatch, the audience is confronted with Invisigal's sex dream, a scene that is deliberately stylized and performative, clearly framed through the lens of the male gaze. The choreography of the moment, combined with its visual language, positions Invisigal not simply as an active participant, but as someone consciously performing desire within a patriarchal framework. When Robert enters the scene, he is immediately positioned on top of her, a visual cue that reinforces his dominance. This staging suggests that Invisigal perceives Robert as holding power over her, an awareness that both unsettles and fascinates her. At the same time, the dream complicates this dynamic. Although Robert appears dominant, the scenario itself is constructed within Invisigal's subconscious, meaning she is both the creator and the subject of the fantasy. Later, at SDN, the tension spills into reality in a far more confrontational way. Invisigal prints out edited fetish content featuring him, an act that both undermines and reasserts control, further blurring the line between private fantasy and public power play. In Royd's lab, she gives him a slow, evaluative once-over and engages him in deliberately invasive, uncomfortable banter, crossing professional and personal boundaries to provoke a reaction. Her question about whether he has ever used the Mechman suit in a sexual context
You ever jerk off in this thing?
lands as intentionally crude and destabilizing, shifting the interaction into something confrontational rather than playful. Robert resists engaging on her terms, but the exchange becomes increasingly tense and one-sided, until he ultimately removes himself from the situation, bringing the encounter to an abrupt end. Later, in the men's bathroom, while Robert is picking the shrapnel out of his chest, she violates his personal boundaries by suddenly appearing close into his personal space. Her intrusion into Robert's space, a space she is not permitted to occupy in waking life, signals a transgressive act that is further exasperated by her confession.
I had a dream last night that we were fucking. Usually I don't remember my dreams, but this one was pretty vivid.
In doing so, she symbolically asserts control, even if that control is mediated through the conventions of patriarchal desire. She then implies she had been observing Robert and Blaze's earlier interaction, reinforcing the invasive nature of her behavior and positioning her less as a flirtatious antagonist than as an active voyeur who weaponizes private moments for humiliation and psychological leverage. This duality underscores the tension between agency and internalized oppression, as her attempts to reclaim power are expressed through the same structures that objectify and destabilize her. Invisigal's behavior can be understood as an attempt to reclaim power through traditionally masculine modes of dominance. Rather than rejecting the structures that disempower her, she temporarily adopts them. This reflects broader feminist critiques of patriarchy as a system of social structures and cultural practices in which men dominate, oppress, and exploit women to maintain power and control over them. Within this framework, Invisigal's actions reveal how deeply these power relations are internalized. Even in her own fantasy, her assertion of agency is shaped by the very system that marginalizes her. From a Jungian perspective, this dream can also be read as a manifestation of psychic imbalance and a push toward transformation. As Jungian theory suggests, the psyche naturally moves toward wholeness when an individual becomes stuck in a way of life or psychological attitude they have outgrown. Symptoms emerge to disrupt that stasis. Invisigal's dream functions as one such symptom, an eruption of the unconscious that forces her to confront desires and tensions she cannot fully acknowledge in her waking life. If these signals are ignored, they risk becoming fixations that contextualize a genuine spiritual need, turning inner conflict into obsession rather than growth. This idea aligns with Jean Boland's notion of psychological transition. Boland argues that remaining confined within familiar roles results in a disconnection from the collective unconscious, the source of both nourishment and creative disruption. Invisigal appears to be at precisely such a threshold. Her dream becomes a liminal space in which she confronts and destabilizes her existing identity by engaging in a chaotic and contradictory fantasy, one that merges submission with dominance. She enters the kind of disorientation Boland describes as necessary for transformation. As Boland writes, when we are doing something because it is expected of us, or to please somebody else, or because we are afraid of somebody else, we become further alienated from a sense of living authentically. If we just keep living out a role that we know well, the cost of that is to become increasingly cut off from that which not only nourishes us, but also provides raw material that allows us to mess up. Very often in transition periods, that's exactly what is called for. A change by going through chaos, of losing the way, of being lost in the forest for some time before we get through and find our path. Ultimately, Invisigal's dream scene is not merely erotic or provocative. It is psychologically and thematically significant. It visualizes Invisigal's internal conflict as she negotiates power, desire, and identity within a patriarchal system. The dream becomes a site of both entrapment and possibility, where her attempt to reclaim agency is deeply entangled with the very structures she seeks to resist, while simultaneously signaling an unconscious drive toward change and wholeness. Robert's repeated refusal to engage with Invisigal on her terms is equally significant, as it destabilizes her attempts to reclaim power through performative dominance. His withdrawal exposes the limits of the fantasy she constructs, revealing the gap between imagined control and lived reality. In this sense, his rebuff intensifies her psychological fragmentation, demonstrating that her inner tensions cannot be resolved through role reversal or confrontation alone. Stage 6. Initiation and Descent to the Goddess. In episode 6 of Dispatch, Invisigal throws Robert a housewarming party, but it's all a ruse, as it's a collaborative effort to help him locate the astral pulse. The purple smoke from the failed mech test triggers Invisigal's memory. She shows a trail of people who have tried and failed to harness the massive energy of the astral pulse. By tracing the history of failure and destruction, the narrative situates the pulse as both a literal and symbolic force, an overwhelming source of energy that resists control and punishes those who approach it unprepared. They manage to locate the energy source in a warehouse by the docks, but the place is armed to the teeth. The shift from celebration to strategy underscores the instability of Invisigal's position as personal and heroic identities begin to blur. Here, Invisigal declares she will go and retrieve it. That,
Can't shoot what you can't see.
furthermore, she says the Z team is ready to go. They have enough strength together to take it back. However, this assertion is immediately challenged. Blonde Blazer urges caution, and Chase reinforces this hesitation, effectively undermining Invisigal's leadership. Chase's subsequent attack is not merely tactical, but deeply personal, by telling her,
You are no fucking hero.
Whoa, hey!
She named you Invisigal, you named yourself Invisibitch, and you had it fucking right.
he strips away the legitimacy of her heroic identity. His words suggest that her persona is not an authentic embodiment of power, but rather a performance, one that fails to meet the expectations of true heroism. In this moment, Chase articulates a harsh truth. Despite all her efforts, Invisigal remains trapped in a cycle of performing strength rather than fully inhabiting it. His critique exposes the fragility of her constructed identity and forces her to confront the gap between who she is and who she claims to be. Chase is pointing out that despite all she's done as a hero, she's still performing. Chase's verbal dismantling of her identity acts as the catalyst for this descent. His words force her to confront the possibility that her current self-concept is inadequate. In Jungian terms, this moment can be understood as the eruption of the shadow. Those disowned or unacknowledged aspects of the self that must be faced in order for transformation to occur. The humiliation and doubt she experiences signals a breakdown of the ego's defenses, pushing her further into psychological disorientation. Crucially, this stage demands that Invisigal relinquish control. The strategies that once defined her, concealment, performance, and imitation of traditionally masculine power, must be abandoned. In their place, she is compelled to enter a space of uncertainty, where she no longer knows how to act or who she is. This is the essence of the descent, a necessary disintegration that creates the conditions for renewal. Some kind of crisis arrives in the heroine's life. The skills, strategies, and resources that the heroine has accumulated throughout their life to this point are insufficient to meet the crisis. The heroine is forced to travel light, so they unmake themselves. They leave behind old knowledge, old ways of doing things, old ways of identifying themselves. As they journey further into their disorientation, in the midst of their turmoil, the heroine meets the feminine elder that they only caught a glimpse of during the boon of success. The descent itself is both psychological and symbolic. As described in the framework, it resembles a journey into the underworld, a dark night of the soul, the belly of the whale, or an encounter with the dark goddess. Invisigal's experience aligns with this pattern. The discovery of the astropulse, surrounded by the remnants of the past, creates a space that functions as an underworld, a site of danger, memory, and confrontation with limits. The pulse represents not just external power, but the internal chaos she has yet to integrate. Thus, Episode 6 marks a turning point in Invisigal's journey. The failed attempt to retrieve the astral pulse, combined with the external invalidation of her identity, forces her into profound crisis. What emerges is not immediate growth, but collapse, a movement inward into darkness and confusion. Yet, it is precisely within this descent that the possibility for transformation is born, but not without a profound loss. Stage 7. The heroine yearns to connect to the feminine. In episode 7 of Dispatch, Invisigal has been suspended pending review. The team is subdued, still reeling from Chase's hospitalization. A majority of Z-Team argues she should be cut. Her lone wolf decision nearly cost Chase his life. It still might. Robert, in this iteration, refuses to get rid of her. He delivers a somber and resolute speech about family, about loyalty, about not abandoning someone at their lowest point. Unbeknownst to them, Invisigal hears everything. It's only with the opening and closing of the conference room door by an invisible hand that her deception has been found out. Overwhelmed, she retreats to the locker room. Robert follows after her, and she's in quite a vulnerable state. He's about to leave, but Invisigal reassures him that he can stay. It's a small permission, but a significant one. She wants him here, at her lowest moment. Robert doesn't try to fix things. He doesn't interrogate or judge. Instead, he offers something steadier. Time. The team will come around, he says. They just need space to process what happened. His words aren't solutions. They're anchors. His words are a catalyst to the next stage of her journey. At this moment, Invisigal's emotional armor peels away, both metaphorically and literally. She's stripped of her deflections and pride. In this vulnerable moment, she opens up to him completely. This moment marks the 7th stage of the heroine's journey, a return to the self through the past, in order to reshape the present and reclaim the future. Here, Invisigal begins to renegotiate her relationship with who she has been. She reaches back towards an earlier version of herself, her villain self, the loner, the woman who believed that isolation was power, that needing no one meant never being controlled. But that version of her told only half the truth. In reality, it left her surrounded by enemies and, ultimately, alone. She speaks of the quiet betrayal she buried instead of confronting, the emotional distance she maintained as a form of control, the way she used people, used him, to serve her own sense of safety and superiority. There's no performance in this confession, no calculated framing, just exposure. This stage is not graceful. It is disorientating, even destabilizing. The composure she once relied on fractures as she confronts emotions she has avoided, rage at herself, grief for what's been lost, fear of vulnerability. As described in the heroine's journey, the descent is not undertaken lightly. It stirs up dust. Beneath the surface, she encounters the feelings she has long suppressed. Anger at her selfishness, and a deep, aching sadness for the hero she desires to be but always falls short of.
All I wanted from this was for people to look at me the same way that you look at Blazer. Even if it was just once, you know?
It's not envy, it's longing. Not just to be admired, but to be seen as worthy of that admiration. Invisigal's confession to Robert becomes an act of unmasking. The persona she has performed, the controlled, self-sufficient operative, falls away. In its place is something far more fragile and honest, a longing to be seen, to be understood, to be accepted without condition. In shedding this mask, she does not become weaker. Rather, she reconnects with a deeper, more integrated self, one that allows space for both strength and vulnerability. This moment also reframes Robert's role as he listens. He is no longer simply the moral anchor of the team, but a witness to her transformation, a stabilizing presence as she navigates the uncertain terrain between who she was and who she might become. His response?
Well, I forgive you. So there, we fucking chill out now.
Reflects his characteristic bluntness, but also his instinct to ground her before she spirals further into self-condemnation. Yet Invisigal cannot accept such an easy absolution, because part of her believes she is beyond forgiveness. The weight of her actions has become inseparable from her sense of self, and Robert's casual reassurance clashes with the harsher judgment she continues to impose upon herself. In this 7th step, Invisigal does not resolve her journey. She complicates it. She is raw, unsettled, and searching. But for the first time, she is no longer running from herself, and that changes everything. Stage 8. The heroine heals the mother and daughter split. Stage 8 is healing the mother-daughter split. On one side, invisigal lives the self-shaped to survive within a patriarchal world, adaptive, guarded, often disconnected from her deeper needs. On the other resides the buried self, her intuition, embodied wisdom, emotional truth, and inherent sense of worth. Whether our personal mother was nurturing or cold, empowering or manipulative, present or absent, our internal relationship with her is integrated into our psyche as the mother complex. In this playthrough, Blonde Blazer embodies a distorted maternal presence for invisigal, a pseudo-mother driven by the need to be seen as a hero. Seen is the operative word. Blonde Blazer performs visibility, recognition, and validation with ease. Invisigal, however, cannot access these traits by following Blonde Blazer's blueprint. She cannot become visible in the same way. Despite wielding powers rooted in invisibility and shadow, invisigal is consumed by the desire for visibility, for recognition, for validation. All the traits that Blonde Blazer exhibits, but invisigal cannot obtain by following her blueprint of heroism. Invisigal lives within the shadows, unseen and elusive. Where Blonde Blazer is the hero meant to be seen, invisigal survives through disappearance. Even the Red Ring cannot find her. At this stage, the player uncovers a pivotal truth. Invisigal has taken the astral pulse and concealed it from everyone, including Shroud. But this act is not rooted in simple defiance or malice. She is hiding, evading the looming threat of the Red Ring. Her choice mirrors the same inherited pattern of retreat and self-protection. Is she a betrayer, or trying to survive, or trying to help in her own way? Her return to the Z-Team marks the beginning of integration, though it's only with time shall we figure out if she will become whole or remain separate. Stage 9. The heroine heals the wounded masculine within. After the power goes out at the SDN Torrance branch in Episode 8 of Dispatch, invisigal is restrained by Royd in the lab, and the astral pulse returned to Robert. Here, she can no longer run or hide, though she tries to hide. Robert confronts invisigal about her actions, wanting the full truth, because she didn't exactly lie to him, didn't tell him everything. Invisigal reveals she was trying to protect him, trying to shield him with ignorance. Here, she exhibits that she ignores her intuition, her female nature for her masculine, that has driven her out of balance, bringing with it destruction and alienation. This unrelated archetypal masculine can be cold and inhuman. It does not take into account our human limitations. Its machoism tells us to forge ahead, no matter what the cost. It demands perfection, control, and domination. Nothing is ever enough. Thumbstick appears on the feeds heading down to the lab area. She demands Robert to untie her, finally listening to her female nature, her intuition. Robert, masculine nature, becomes a positive force, bolstering her with benevolence and strength. He unties her. The unconscious cannot carry out the process of individuation on its own. It is dependent on the cooperation of consciousness. This needs a strong ego. This in turn helps invisigal be in tune with her feminine nature and rediscover the meaning of the masculine nature. Freed, invisigal steps back into the world of action, but differently. She joins the fight against the Red Ring, and, in a deliberate echo of the past, she plants a bomb on Shroud's spider mech, mirroring the moment she once sabotaged Robert's mech. The symmetry is intentional. The meaning has changed. What was once betrayal is now aligned with collective purpose. But integration is not tested in symmetry. It is tested under pressure. Shroud seizes Beef as a hostage and delivers a calculated speech, offering invisigal an escape hatch. The narrative of the double agent. It is a psychological trap, designed to fracture trust and isolate her once more. And invisigal disappears. Yet, this disappearance resists easy interpretation. Is there regression? Shame pulling her back into the shadows? Or is it strategy? An intentional, integrated use of her power? The ambiguity is the point. She is no longer split in the same way, but she is not yet fully whole. The tension now is not between being seen or unseen, but whether she can hold both states without losing herself. The answer arrives through action. From within the unseen, invisigal makes a choice that redefines her relationship to her power. She uses her invisibility not to escape, but to protect. She steps into the line of fire and takes a bullet meant for Robert. This is the turning point. What she once perceived as a deficit, her invisibility, her shadow, her absence, becomes the very source of her heroism. She no longer rejects or overcompensates for it. She integrates it. Her power is no longer a mechanism of avoidance. It becomes an instrument of love, courage, and presence. In this act, she heals the wounded masculine within, no longer driven by control or perfection. Her masculine energy now works in harmony with her intuition, capable of decisive action, but guided by empathy and connection. As Maureen Murdoch writes, this is the moment the heroine becomes the mistress of both worlds. Invisigal can now move between visibility and invisibility, action and intuition, surface and depth. She no longer blames the other. She recognizes herself within it. The split dissolves into integration. From that integration comes transformation, not just for her, but for those around her. She does not abandon the shadows. She claims them, and in doing so, she brings their wisdom into the light. Stage 10. The heroine integrates the masculine and feminine. By this stage, Invisigal is no longer operating from a fractured state. The opposing forces within her, the intuitive embodied feminine and the strategic action-driven masculine, are no longer in conflict. They are in dialogue. What once pulled her apart now works in concert. The team's reaction is telling. They cheer her on, chanting, It's crude, even jarring, but that's the point. The language reflects the world they inhabit, unpolished, reactive, and often uninvolved. Early in her journey, that label carried weight. Bitch. It defined her, reduced her, reinforced her isolation. Now, it no longer has the same power. The chant doesn't validate her transformation, it reveals it. She is no longer orientating herself around their approval or rejection. For the first time, her sense of self is internally anchored. Everything Invisigal wanted, recognition, belonging, validation, is now within reach, but it lands differently. These are no longer prizes to be chased or identities to perform. They are byproducts of integration, not substitutes for it. Drawing again from Maureen Murdoch, this stage represents a synthesis. The heroine no longer rejects the masculine, nor loses herself in it. Instead, she reclaims it in a form that aligns with her deeper knowing. Action is no longer served from feeling. Strength is no longer defined by control. Visibility is no longer dependent on performance. What Dispatch Invisigal does well is resist the temptation of clean redemption. The narrative does not ask the audience to excuse Invisigal's past, her secrecy, her manipulation, the harm she caused. It asks something more difficult, to understand the conditions that shaped her, and to witness what she does with that awareness. Her growth is not cinematic in the traditional sense. It is incremental, uneven, and at times uncomfortable. That's the real shift. The central question is no longer whether she deserves redemption. The story sidesteps that moral binary altogether. What matters is agency. Will she take responsibility for who she has been, and actively choose who she is becoming? And in this moment, without spectacle, without absolution, she does. Not perfectly, not completely, but consciously. She chooses alignment over avoidance, connection over control, presence over disappearance. And that choice, repeated over time, is what makes her whole. Conclusion. Dispatch ultimately distinguished itself not by rejecting traditional narrative frameworks, but by expanding them, where Joseph Campbell emphasizes ascent, conquest, and external validation. Maureen Murdoch offers a counterpoint, a descent into the self, where transformation is earned through confrontation, loss, and integration. Invisigal's arc does not replace one model with the other. It reveals what becomes visible when both are held in tension. Across the 10 stages, her journey resists simplicity. She does not level up into heroism through skill acquisition or singular triumph. Instead, she unravels. She sheds identities that once protected her. Invisibitch, Invisigal, even the idea of what a hero should look like, until she is left with something far less certain, but far more honest. Each stage demands not mastery, but surrender to vulnerability, to accountability, to the parts of herself she has long avoided. What makes her arc compelling is that it refuses the illusion of clean transformation. Invisigal lies, manipulates, withdraws, and harms others along the way. The narrative does not erase or excuse these actions. Instead, it contextualizes them, situating her behavior within systems of expectation, internalized judgment, and fractured identity. The question is never whether she was good or bad, but whether she is willing to see herself clearly and choose differently. By stage 10, Invisigal has not become perfect. She has become integrated. Her invisibility, once a symbol of shame and avoidance, becomes a tool of intention. Her connection to others, once defined by control or distance, becomes grounded in trust. The masculine and feminine within her, action and intuition, assertion and empathy, no longer compete for dominance. They collaborate. This is the quiet radicalism of Dispatch. It suggests that heroism is not found in spectacle nor in the defeat of an external enemy, but in the ongoing, often uncomfortable process of self-reckoning. Growth is not a single moment of triumph, but a series of choices. Small, conscious, and repeated over time. Invisigal's final transformation is not that she is seen differently by others. It is that she no longer depends on being seen to exist. And in that shift, she becomes not just a hero, but a whole person. Whew, that was a long video. So, did you like it? Did you hate it? What are your thoughts? Was I on point or was I lacking? I would really like to know what you thought. Put it in the comments below. And remember to like and subscribe. And until next time, remember to stay happy.